How are ya?
That was good. How are you?
How are ya?
I feel like I just sound like I'm old and beleaguered.
How are ya? Kind of. A little bit, you know. It's very...
How are ya?
How are ya?
How are ya?
How are ya?
I don't know.
How are ya?
You're giving me, what's his name? Mitch from Wolf Creek on it. A little bit. Was his name Mitch?
Are you telling me I'm getting a little bit of an Australian accent? No.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like, how are you? I don't know.
Well, it's supposed to be less Australian, more Irish. That's sort of the language that we're going for today.
Irish. Wow.
Irish. Yes,
Okay.
you pronounce your I's like you would oil.
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 Irish.
Irish.
Oigloo.
Yes.
It doesn't work on that word.
Polite.
It doesn't. Oigloo.
Blight.
It does. Interestingly, it does work on blight, something that the Irish know plenty about. Interestingly enough.
Polite. Right.
Right. So today we are
Happy
drinking.
St. Patty's Day.
Oh, that's right. Yes, so we're drinking.
Coming up.
Because St. Patty's Day is coming up.
Uh-huh.
Which is very exciting.
I found an old bottle of Irish liqueur in my
we're
bar.
So this is episode 5. We're very excited to have made it to episode 5. This might be the last episode of the Haunted Heart podcast that you hear because this might kill us.
Who knows?
We wanted to get Bailey's, but we ran out of time to get Bailey's this week. And so we found a bottle of St. Brendan's Irish cream liqueur, hidden in one of Kenny's cabinets.
In a cool, dark place.
Definitely you're supposed to drink it within 6 months of opening it. And it was open, but reclosed. So I'm thinking we're not entirely sure what the timeline on the Irish cream liqueur is, but you're thinking it's definitely over a year.
Yeah.
We're definitely looking at over a year.
Yeah, definitely past 6 months on this one.
Probably more.
But hey, you know what?
But we're going to do it.
What doesn't kill us gives
us severe gas pain and probably diarrhea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Vomiting, probably.
Unlike the Irish.
But hey.
We have a very reliable emergency medical situation in this country. So we have to figure out how to pay for it, of course, after we go. So it might actually be better to just die of
we all know a true Irish
poisoning.
would be able to stand it regardless.
A true Irish. Is that what your biography is going to be? A true Irish?
A true Irish.
Kenneth. A true Irish.
Yes. Cheers.
Jesus.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Some ASMR action for you. What do you think?
It's a little bit too sweet, but I kind of think that about all Irish cream liqueur.
It's not bad. I don't think it's going to kill me. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I don't think it's spoiled. It's interesting.
Would be really good mixed in with something, though.
Yeah.
Like a coffee. We're drinking it straight on ice.
That's
so
true.
I
we're
really
drinking it over the
coffee.
rocks.
So.
Yeah, we should have done coffee, but if I do that, I won't sleep because I'm an elderly person, so,
An elderly person who comes up to people and says, "How are ya?
How are ya? How are ya, old sport?"
Did you know most people are completely wrong when they say, "Top of the morning"?
Top of the morning to
No,
you.
that's not something.
Really? I mean, it definitely seems like something that Hallmark made. I would not expect to go to Ireland and be like...
No, it's... No,
people see me on the street.
Much more simple. Just a short, sweet, how ya? Which is nice, It's very warm. I'm about it.
So, something that you should know about us before we get too deep into this podcast episode is that Kenny recently did 23andMe. Was it 23andMe, Ken?
Yes, it was.
So he recently did the old spit test that tells you what your genetic makeup is. Mm-hmm. So he's been obsessed with Ireland ever since.
I really have. I have kind of been... I've been studying our subject for a while now, so it's been really interesting to see that, it came back. I was like 70% Irish, which is really weird, considering that I thought it was going to be more German than anything.
Yeah, he's really going for it. He's going for it with that whole genealogy thing. I, on the other hand, haven't been like officially. I haven't done my official like genetic testing or anything like that yet. I'm interested in it, but I haven't done it yet. But I have always known that I am Scottish. My last name, I probably shouldn't give my last name on the podcast, but who cares? You can find it on Google. Like, come on. So my last name is Murray, and the Murrays were the biggest army, the biggest clan. I know we had the biggest army. I think we were also the biggest clan. I definitely know we were the richest in Scotland. So Kenny's from Ireland, genetically, and I am traced back to Scotland. And Scotland, for those of you who don't know, is like the land of like the frickin', like if the curmudgeonly old lady in the back of like any like PTA meeting room could be a country, it would probably be Scotland. Like Scotland's just like trying to fuck off and do their own thing all the time. And I love it. I embrace that. So yeah, so I'm pretty sure that I'm Scottish. Watch me take the 23andMe test and I'm like Jamaican. Like 100%.
French. You would get something
I would
like...
be so mad if I wouldn't tell anybody. I would just make it all up. I would be so mad. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I thought it was going to be more German because that's where, like, I might as well give my last name, too, right? Since we're sharing last names.
Yeah.
Strader is actually an Americanized version of Stroder. Mm-hmm. So the Irish part of my tree comes from my mother's side because I have definitively traced back my lineage on my father's side, which goes back to Germany. So the Irish part is from my mother's side. So
I feel like this sounds like a commercial for Ancestry.com. It's not. They're not paying us.
No, it's just...
We're not getting any of that good money. So, you know what? Don't go there. Don't go to Ancestry.com.
But it's really fun, though. It's really interesting to sort of trace everything back. So, and even, Irish history itself is like crazy with the mythology and their history. It's sort of like mythology and fact actually seems to be sort of intertwined together.
Yeah, it's very
which is really
intricate.
Cool. Because you have some certain myths and things which I'm going to talk about, which could actually be, real people, but we're just sort of glazed over with that sort of mythological, magical brush. So it's really interesting, but I actually found out that there was Ireland has a book of invasions, which tells...
Wait.
A book of invasions.
Wait, your country has been invaded so many times that you have a book of invasions so that you can keep track of and chronologically sort the vast array of invasions you have faced.
Essentially.
Okay, I'm
Chapter 1.
Just clarifying that point. Chapter 2.
Oh, that one too.
Oh, remember that?
No, it was more or less like different people coming in and invading the country. A lot of it actually has biblical undertones to it, which is really interesting because some of the people that came over were said to be descendants of Noah. And, people that didn't make it onto his big giant boat.
So they went to an island, like a tiny island in the middle of the...
They got on their own little thing and
ocean?
Went over.
Where all the water is?
Yeah, that thing. But anyway, so you actually, the book talks about several different groups of people that invaded Ireland. One of the most interesting ones, and they all sort of like had their moment and then died out. Something happened. They could never sustain themselves. Whether it be by plague or, whatever. something always happened that caused them to die out. Up until, the current people, which are said to be the last descendants of one of the invasions, or the current descendants of the last invasion that took place. But one of the most interesting ones to me, actually, was this group of people called the Nemedians, or Nemedians, however you want to say it. They came over, and they did fairly well for themselves, right? Like, so they come over to this island. They've got this really great guy leading them, and they got there, and they encountered this ancient race of people, supposedly, called the Fomorians. Now, do you know anything about Fomorians? I know you have a little bit of history on...
I do. Yeah. So, I know of... I've always called the Fomorians the fair folk, and I know of them mostly through... There's actually... If you guys are interested in what we're kind of getting into today, particularly the Fomorians or the fair folk, you would probably really enjoy a particular fantasy writer named Juliet Marillier. She is now... Fantasy's not like my big genre. Like, I'm not a huge like Lord of the Rings person or anything like that, but I absolutely love Juliet Marillier. She is a fantastic writer, and she sort of weaves the Celtic mythology and other forms of mythology, fairy tales. She works with fairy tales a lot too, traditional fairy tales, and she weaves that into these like incredibly ornate stories that are very detailed, and most of the time center on a strong female character, which is very cool. I highly recommend that you check her out. You should start with the trilogy. It's called the Seven Waters trilogy. It's now been expanded to like 6 books or something. But the first one is called Daughter of the Forest. The second one is Son of the Shadows, and the third one is Child of the Prophecy. It's fantasy, but it also has like some romance mixed in, but it's not cheap. It's very like... It's very well done, and it's very well researched. So a lot of what I know about the fair folk come from the myths that I've kind of read of hers.
When you were a little gothy high school kid, I'm assuming, right?
I read her first book when I was 13, and it was very... it was a very adult book. It was very... I guess I should probably tell people this if I'm recommending the book. But there's a particular scene where a young girl is raped, like super brutally. And that was the first time I had ever encountered anything like that in, stuff that I was reading or TV or anything like that. And so that was kind of like, in that sense, it was sort of a book that I sort of see as ushering me into adulthood, if that makes sense. Like, because it wasn't, what I mean when I say it's not cheap fantasy, or it's not like the fantasy that you think of when you think of fantasy writing, is it's just so her storytelling is so well told from all different angles that you get to see the dark and you get to see the light, and there's just so much like duality and like all the different spectrums. It's not like good versus evil. There's like chaotic neutral and all that. It's very much like Celtic mythology itself. Yeah. In that there is no clear good or evil. It's about, it's more realistic than that. Yeah.
And just because, one thing that I've noticed is that you can start with a certain idea as far as, a specific type of creature or being, and then sometimes that it evolves into something else as the mythology grows or gets older, so
of course it changes with each generation. I think that's the thing about mythology that makes it so interesting, is that it evolves like that.
But you don't really hear a lot about Irish mythology in general. Like, I feel like it really takes a back burner to some of the other myths and things that we know.
I think we study a lot of Greek in school, Greek mythology, somewhat Egyptian. Norse is huge.
Yes.
Yeah, but I don't think there's a whole lot. I don't think mainstream there's a lot of Celtic mythology that's studied. I mean, beyond the basic symbols that everybody knows, like the nod and like the claddagh, like things like that. But yeah.
So it's really interesting, actually, because the stories are really amazing. So it surprises me that we don't talk a little bit more about it. And Ireland is full of creatures and folklore. It is so rich in folklore and magic and based in magic that it just surprises me that it's not, emphasized as much as it should be, I feel like. Maybe that's just a little bit of pride coming out. I'm just like,
a little bit really of pride since 2 months ago he really discovered he was Irish.
Really trying to stand it. No, I always thought I had a little bit in me. That's kind of what I was told on my mother's side through my grandmother, but I never really paid much attention to it, and I didn't think it was as big of a, as much of a part of me as it is. Blood percentage-wise, whatever. But anyway.
Okay, Irish expert. Why don't you tell us a bit about Celtic mythology? Give the people what they want.
Well, so anyway, like I was saying, you have the Fomorians, which always sort of appear to be on the island. Like, nobody really knows exactly where they came from. They just sort of are always there, right? And not each invasion, but for the most part, every invasion, the people that come over have to face the Fomorians, right? Some people say that the Fomorians were actually pirates from Carthagena, something. Carthage, yeah.
Like the one that was burned by Rome?
One of those,
Salting and burning? Okay.
Yeah, that empire, right?
Sounds like solid research.
Yeah.
We're doing.
No, that empire. So some people think that they came from that empire and went and sailed over into Ireland, and that's where they were. But they were given this characteristic of being like demons, almost like demons of chaos.
Yeah, for the most part. Kind of two different so for the Fomorians there's kind of two different characterizations, right? There's the one that everybody kind of like knows. These are the folks who you hear the term fairy tossed around a lot. And when you think of fairies, like you think of little tiny sprite like Tinkerbell creatures, but these kinds of fairies from the fair folk aren't little tiny sprite like creatures. They're closer to like the elves in Lord of the Rings. They're big, tall, lean, thin.
Well, we're getting our hairs crossed a little bit. The
Fomorians are we talking about?
Yeah. So the Fomorians are not the same as the other group that I'm getting
that we're going to get. Yeah. Okay, I jumped the gun.
The Fomorians are they're considered to be the opposite of who you're talking about. Okay. So the Fomorians were these chaotic, warlike demons. They really sort of represented a negative aspect of magic in general, and just that sort of like anti-everything good.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And they were very aggressive, and they fought every invasion, and usually, for the most part, ended up winning, right? So then you get these people, the Nemedians, who come over, and they've got this really great guy who's leading him, who, just really sets them on the right path. They fight the Fomorians, there's 4 different battles that they win each time. So they win the 4 battles. And then a plague comes along.
Damn.
Fucking plague.
Don't you hate it when that happens?
A plague comes along and just decimates the Nemedians, right? So, the Fomorians
fought the Fomorians, but you couldn't fight the flu.
No. Sure can't.
No dice.
So, the Fomorians obviously are like, okay, y'all all dying?
Were they like immune?
Apparently.
I guess? Yeah,
because they were supposed to, they were like, they were supernatural in a sense. So I think that they were sort of immune to it.
Okay.
And
whereas the Numidians were human.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. And so they took advantage of that, and they conquered the Numidians finally, and wound up enslaving them for quite a while. I think for a couple of centuries. Apparently people lived very long lives, which is not the case, but in myth, people lived very long lives.
Mythology.
Right. But a really cool fact is that the Fomorians supposedly made them, the Numidians, give sacrifices to them as on Samhain. Mm-hmm. Which I was like, okay, this is a really cool little connection. So on Samhain, the Fomorians forced the Numidians to give them sacrifices of like food, sometimes children.
Oh, that's cool. What did they do with the children?
I'm not 100%. I think it's just glazed over as sacrifices that they were just given to the Fomorians.
Children are kind of like a lot of work. Like they're a little bit of a pain. I don't know. I don't know that I would want to be given one. Like certainly not at this point in life. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
So.
But, with all things, they eventually grow tired of it. So
the Numidians do.
Yeah, the Numidians get really tired of it, and so they rise up in this great
So we have like
rebellion.
an I am Spartacus moment.
Yeah, they get into this huge battle. It's like the battle to end all battles, right? Because they're fighting at this point. They're like, we have nothing left to lose,
right?
So either we just all die fighting because we're not going to live in the slavery anymore, right? Or we're going to fucking kick your ass. Either way you go about it, right? Mm-hmm. Solid. So they actually rise up and defeat them. They thought they defeated them. And they thought they defeated them, and then all of a sudden, these Fomorian, this other group of Fomorians came out of nowhere and really just destroyed the Numidians. So the Numidians had a moment of victory where they were like, "Yay, we won!" And then, two groups. Yeah, there were two Fomorian kings or warriors, if you will, that were sort of doing their own little thing off somewhere. And then when they heard the battle, they came in a little late, but came in nonetheless.
Late to the party. That's all right.
But they shut the party down.
There you go.
They shut the party down because at that point the Numidians were tired.
Right.
They lost their sense of, they lost their defenses, really, or their defenses were down. So they came in and just destroyed them. So only about 30 Numidians survived the battle. And what they did was they fled.
Mm-hmm. I mean, good choice.
Yeah, they fled.
I applaud it.
Right.
Sounds like a good decision.
So they fled. And some go east and become the Brits. Mm-hmm. Some go south and become this group of people called the Fairbolgs. And some go north and become the Duodenans.
There we go.
Yes.
That's the group of people I was talking about. Here's where I know some information.
Yeah, so a little bit.
Here's where I know a marginal bit of information that may or may not be accurate at all.
Well, the Brits, they're doing their own, you don't really hear much from them after that. They go off, they become British, and then they're
conquer, most of the world, and the sun never sets on the British Empire, but that part's boring. Let's study the potato people, right?
Who cares?
Come on.
But what I'm saying is they go off and do their own thing, and they don't really come back to Ireland, right? They're done. Yeah. They start
they definitely do, and Ireland's pretty mad about it.
But initially, in mythology, that the Numidians that went there did not come back. They did their own thing. Mm-hmm. Whether or not they came back later, Hey, that's history, right?
Spoiler alert, they did.
So anyway, so then Ireland's left to the Fomorians for a couple hundred years. Mm-hmm. And the Fairbolgs, which went to the east, mm-hmm. or no, they went south, excuse me. They went down to Greece. And the fucking Greece, the people of Greece enslaved them.
Cool. Damn it.
For 230 years.
Damn it. The wrong decision. You left
They landed.
Ireland. Hey, the weather's better in Greece.
Yeah, that's true.
The weather is better in Greece. If I had to choose, I would choose Greece.
Yeah. And, well, they didn't have as, their luck wasn't as great as the Duodenans, because they went north and became, like, magical super creatures, right? So they learned magic from the north.
Okay. So is that where so to catch you guys back up, the people that I was talking about before, the fair folk, that's the Duodenans.
Yes.
That's where, so the fair folk are these like really cool magical creatures that's where the fairy sort of lore came from. But instead of being like Tinkerbell fairies, these are very tall, very beautiful, very thin, sculpted features, like supermodels. Like imagine like, I don't know, like Liv Tyler as her elf creature.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of exactly what
in Lord of the Rings. Like that's basically the fair folk. But they were super tall.
They were considered gods, essentially. For the most part.
Sort of, yeah.
At that time. Again, that goes back to everything sort of evolving. Like, they go from gods and then, to what they currently are, which are the fair folk.
Yeah,
right?
They're currently sort of an in-between place. They're not a deity that is worshipped, but they're this really cool in-between sort of, kind of like how we were talking about last week with voodoo, like the Gedes that are kind of like go-betweens for, like, not actual gods, but kind of like almost like saints in the Catholic religion, kind of the go-betweens. That's kind of what the fair folk are, except for the fair folk, like, could give a fuck about literally anything other than their own parties and stuff. Like, that's my impression, is that, like, they just want to chill and have a great time, and they, like, will sometimes fuck with humans that, like, invade their space just for kicks and giggles, but, like, they could care less about literally anything.
Right.
Is that...
Yeah, no, I mean, that's kind of how it is. So they go up north, and they hone their magical abilities. And the people that up north, sort of, they gave them 4 islands to live on.
Are those called the Light Isles?
I'm not 100%.
Okay.
I don't think anybody really knows where those 4 islands, from what I've researched, I don't think those are known, what those 4 islands would have been.
Okay.
But they were given 4 small islands to sort of live and sort of train and hone their own magical abilities, right? Mm-hmm. So in the meantime, you have the Fairbolgs, right, which are being enslaved, and they get tired of that shit. Yeah. They're like, we're done.
I mean...
Let's go back to our motherland, right? So... Let's go back to our motherland. They sneak away. I think they steal some ships. And, like, decide they're going back to Ireland. So, obviously, nobody has...
So, are these... Sorry, because it's mythology, I kind of need to clarify. Are these the same people who went to Greece, or are these the ancestors of the people who went...
They're the ancestors. They're like the people.
Removed.
They're the... Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, so it's not like people who were in Ireland that went to Greece that got enslaved and then went back to Ireland. These are like the kids of the people who
these are like their
From,
ancestors.
so they've never been to Ireland
a couple
before.
Of centuries.
Okay, all right. Okay.
So, but obviously knowing their history, they're like, let's go back.
Sorry, I also looked up Light Isles while I'm interrupting, and the Light Isles are a fictional. They are actually the name of a duology by Juliet Marillier. So that is not real, and instead a fictional place from a fantasy book. So there we go. Yeah. Just wanted to clarify that's not real. But I do recommend that you read that duology. Well, continue.
Yeah, so they decide they're going back to Ireland. they arrive. Surprisingly, nobody has invaded it since.
Okay.
And strangely enough, this group of people, for whatever reason, the Fairbolgs, never encounter the Fomorians.
Interesting. So
They
did they
never
just
have
kind
any
of cut him a
issues.
break?
I don't know. They just sort of disappear within the Fairbolgs sort of rule Ireland, and they do it very well. And they're actually known as like one of the great sort of beings or ancestors of Ireland, whereas some of the other ones that came in and sort of failed and died off, like the Fairbolgs are like still noted today.
Do you think that the Tuatha Dé Danann had anything to do with that?
Yeah, they actually.
Do you think that they kind of like?
Well, no. See, the Tuatha Dé Danann at the same
protected
time. No,
they didn't protect them.
No.
Okay.
By no means did they protect them.
Okay.
That
doesn't sound very much like the Fair Folk, because the Fair Folk love chaos. So I could see them just
No, the Fair
with
Folk
them
like
relentlessly.
they decide that we're coming back.
Okay.
And at this point, the Fomorians had been there for 32 years at this point. So the Fairfolk come in, and they're said to have flown in on great big ships that had like clouds of smoke surrounding them, or like a great mist is how they landed in Ireland. And some people actually think they sailed over and then burned their own ships because they're like, we're here to stay.
Interesting.
So they burn their own ships as sort of an act of like, listen, we're coming to fucking conquer this place, and we're going to win.
I like it.
We're not going to flee.
It's a confidence vote.
Yeah.
I like it. It's good.
So that's where they thought the smoke and the mist came from, because they set fire to their own ships. So then you have this tension between the Fairbolgs, which are, thriving, and, the Fairfolk, which come in. And the Fairbolgs are sort of described as being very earthly people, very hard workers.
Good God, was that the cat? Sorry, I don't know if you guys heard it, but there was like just this massive thump.
They probably
And I'm pretty
didn't.
sure that was the cat running into the table. Good God.
No, he jumped up. So
I'm very sensitive to sound issues this episode, Kenny.
Oh God, yeah, we did.
Had a fucking like white noise machine running in the last episode.
Listen, last episode it was hot as hell. We had the AC
God.
running, and we didn't think about it until after the fact, and we were almost done, and the AC was like completely all up in the background. So we do apologize.
Yeah.
But in our defense, it was really hot.
It was. We're gonna not do that again. However,
they probably didn't hear that though, and then you just made.
I mean,
and then you just made that
who knows?
segue.
They probably. I feel like they probably know by now. If they're in episode 5, I think they understand very clearly that we don't have a sound person.
No, we don't.
So there you go. It's just us. This is what you get.
But so going back, the Fairbolgs actually were considered to be very hard workers. They were sort of people of the earth, almost, just very good, down-to-earth sort of type of people. Hard workers, they farm the lands, made it their own,
They were farmers.
yeah,
I mean, it sounds
kind
like
of.
they were farmers.
A little bit. And the Fairfolk, which I'm just going to say because I'm not going to keep trying to say
I mean,
Tuatha Dé
I
Danann
think
every
Fairfolk
time.
is way cooler.
The Fairfolk, they came in, and so they were like, listen, guys, we're here now. So
we burned the
they
ships,
started
we did the
fighting.
thing.
Yeah, so then they started fighting. So then you had the Fairbolgs and the Fairfolk, which fought. They fought each other. But in the end, it said that the Fairbolgs fought so valiantly and so well that the Fairfolk were actually like, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take over most of the land, right? But we're going to let you have a small piece of it to yourself so that you can live over here, do your own thing, farm your own lands, have your own people, and we won't bother you. And then that's what happened.
Yeah, that's a cool element of the Fairfolk that is definitely present in all the literature about them is that they're very, they're not, they have this weird sense of justice, and they have this weird sense of morality where they're not totally evil. They're not like demon creatures. But then they're not really a force for good either. They're kind of like the ultimate chaotic neutral, where they do their thing and they're kind of self-involved and selfish, but they recognize these weird traits in humans that they will reward. So there's a lot of like funny, and even a little bit later we can get into, actually I have some of the stories of what happens if you cross the fair folk, the kind of negative things that could happen if you cross them the wrong way. But I mean, they do kind of have an interesting relationship with other groups, especially humans, where they kind of reward these weird like fighting very valiantly. You know, for some reason that strikes, and then I think it comes down to being genuine, like the really genuine traits of fighting so valiantly, or, you know, being selfless or something like that, that kind of like seems to have an impact on them.
The Fairbolgs killed a lot of their people too.
Yeah.
So like they were like, I guess they were a little shook, you know.
Yeah.
Like, listen, they came in with all of this, you know, magical prowess, and then to sort of have a really good fight being put up with the you know, these people who are essentially still related to them. I mean, they come from the same people.
Right.
The Nemedians, right?
Yeah.
So I guess they sort of recognized their own, you know, they saw greatness.
Right.
And said, you know,
well, they're not a merciless people, I think, is the key.
No. Because they were still considered, again, to be on that more, even though they weren't 100% good, they were still
definitely
in
not.
that spectrum a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
As opposed to the Fomorians, which were all sort of negative. So, and then, so what happened to the Fomorians? Yeah, like, right?
where did they go?
What are they doing in all this?
Are they just...
They don't show up until the Fairfolk win against the Fairbolgs. And I don't know if they just, maybe the Fomorians liked the Fairbolgs. They were like, okay, we're going to leave them alone. Or what. But when the Fairfolk assumed the majority control over Ireland, the Fomorians were like, excuse me? Sorry, you forgot about us, right?
Interesting.
So then you have this great battle between the Fairfolk and the Fomorians, and it's really interesting because you have some characters, which I'm not going to get into because there are so many characters involved
like
with
on the fringes.
Wars.
Fringe
and so you have some people were actually, like, they intermarried, even though they were at odds with each other.
Yeah, I mean, that always happens,
and, the Fairfolk, you know, had people that were, you know...
that started different races, I'm sure.
Yeah, so... But it eventually... it ends with the Fairfolk winning, and then you don't really see the Fomorians anymore. So the Fairfolk are sort of credited with finally destroying the Fomorians. And they're said to have been, like, pushed off into the sea. So they're, to this day, the Fomorians sort of take on, like, a sea aspect now, like sea creatures and sea demons that now live in the sea,
right,
as opposed to
which
land.
Makes sense because the Fairfolk are very much associated with land, and particularly the forest and nature, and that kind of makes sense.
Think about it, going back to what people think the origins of the Fomorians were as a pirate, you know, sort of community, like
they kind of
went back to that.
Interesting.
And the Fairfolk ruled for quite a while until the Malaysians came in, and the Malaysians are actually considered to be the modern day, or the ancestors of the modern day Irish people. And they, of course, had their own battle, and the Malaysians won and struck a pact with the Fairfolk. And that pact was that the Malaysians would take above ground in this world, and the Fairfolk would live underground or in, you know, the Otherworld, so have you.
Right.
So that's sort of that that's sort of the history between the different types of people. But what I think is really interesting, though, is the fair folk were said to have brought 4 mystical objects that they brought back with them, which to me remind me of the tarot cards. Mm-hmm. And you know I love my tarot. Mm-hmm. And you know that I received my tarot cards in a really weird way, which we'll talk about that in another episode, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. But they brought with them a magical sword, which is part of the tarot. A magical cauldron, which I kind of see as a version of the cup.
Right, yeah.
A spear,
I can see that.
Which I consider to be the wand.
Yeah, I can see that too.
And the stone, which I consider to be the pinnacle. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was an interesting... when I was reading that and they brought those over, I was like, that sort of reminds me of the tarot a little bit. The four houses of the tarot. And another interesting part is that sometimes these Fomorians were described as having the body of a man and the head of a goat.
Oh, interesting.
Am I a descendant of the fair folk and the Fomorians?
Oh my god.
Who knows?
I mean, do you look like Liv Tyler in freaking Lord of the Rings?
Who knows?
I'm filled with a sudden fear that that's not Liv Tyler.
It's probably not.
God. She looks so much like her, though. I feel like I may have made... I'm hearing
that is Liv Tyler.
Ghost of Nerds Past raging against me for having made that mistake. Is it?
No.
I feel like it is. It totally
Liv
is,
Tyler,
right? Nobody
yes,
has lips
yes.
like that but Liv Tyler. And eyes.
No, that was Liv Tyler.
She's freaking gorgeous.
That was for sure Liv Tyler.
Okay. All right. Cool.
But I just thought that was interesting because, that's sort of learning about my genealogy, and then, I don't know, I just thought it was an interesting connection between the tools that they brought over as the tarot, which I do read, and then, the body of a man and the head of a goat. That was my inspiration for last year's Halloween costume. I could literally show you guys pictures of that, which we will post. So I don't know. It was just, I was like a little, interesting. So.
Cool. So that kind of is the very convoluted history of Celtic mythology. Good job. That's not an easy story to tell. So good job
really
handling the twists and turns and invasions and
so many invasions.
Yeah.
So many different characters and people and gods and kings, and it's a lot. It's very. It can be very
convoluted, and that's a much simplified version of it too.
Yes.
So.
But they're not the only, they're not the only creatures that...
I personally have had a long... I mean, I told you guys that I first was introduced to the fair folk through Juliet Marillier's books at age 13. And I've, of course, read them ever since. And I have always been fascinated by the fair folk, but more than that, sort of agents that do operate in the chaotic neutral space. I just think it's interesting, the things that they, I think it's interesting that they're not necessarily a force for good, but they're not necessarily a force for evil, and they're kind of connected to nature and the forest and, the duality of man and, all of that kind of rolled into one entity.
To me, they always seemed like a balancer of
yes,
nature. You know what I mean? So, if it tipped in one way or the other, then it was their job to correct it. Yeah,
and then there's different ways to look at them. So there are people who look at the fair folk as full of whimsy. And that's not necessarily how they operate. They do have a structure, a hierarchy of ruler, which we don't necessarily have to get into that, but it's similar to a court. But so they're not just total chaos agents, but they do sort of tend to take a sort of glee or interest in human suffering. Not that they're totally against, just with just like with the Fairbogs, they recognized that their enemy fought valiantly and showed mercy for that. But there have been, many stories of things that can happen when a human sort of unwittingly crosses the fair folk and crosses into their other world. So there are portals all through the woods, usually out in nature, and it's said that sometimes so everybody usually, the one that everybody always knows is the mushroom circle.
Yes.
So when you see a mushroom circle, it's supposed to be evidence that the fair folk had a party there and they've been dancing in that area around and around in a circle, and that's why the mushrooms grow. And yes, and there's actually a scientific explanation for why mushrooms grow, but I actually,
You're not a scientist, right?
In 8th grade when I learned, I am not, but in 8th grade when I learned that, I was so upset that I had been taught that, because I was so, and I support learning, I totally do, but, I actually remember, actively choosing to believe the myth over the scientific reality, which is that, the way that mushrooms' roots work, they grow out from a central point in the ground, and then it makes sense that they're all in a circle because they're all connected to this center hub or whatever. It's scientific garbage. Well, fairies have been dancing on the ground.
Well, I personally am a firm believer in the marriage between science and magic.
Me too.
So I think, I don't know. I'm with you. I think the fairies were dancing, and something scientifically happened that caused the mushrooms to do that.
Yeah. So I'm a huge believer in and there's definitely not time to get into it on the episode today, but there's that kind of thinking where science and mythology kind of come together to create a version of the truth. Mm-hmm. I don't think. Yeah, I definitely believe in marrying the two. So that's the way that everybody that's the one that everybody kind of knows. But did you know how you can tell when you're walking in the woods whether you're about to cross into a realm of the fair folk? What signs to look for?
How am I supposed to know if I'm walking into a group of fairies?
Not necessarily into a group of fairies, but crossing into the other realm where the fair folk live. Crossing from our world into the other world.
So I know that there's some stones, right?
Yeah. A pile of stones.
Piles of stones.
So if there's a pile of small stones that's been sort of obviously stacked, that's said to be a key, especially if there's two and you walk between them. That's said to create sort of a door. Another thing to look for is orbs, floating lights that appear to be leading you in a particular direction or another. From what I've read, if you start seeing the orbs, it's probably a little bit too late, because the fair folk sometimes, while they tend to react very strongly, which we'll get into in a second, to humans crossing into the other world. Sometimes they get bored. And so they'll decide to play a trick on a human, and they'll appear as these floating orbs of light, and they'll sort of lead you, and you kind of fall into a little bit of a trance, and they lead you into the other realm. And then no bueno.
And then not good.
Usually no bueno. So things that result from going into the other world with the fair folk, a lot of stories that have been told report lost time. Many stories exist of a person waking from a prolonged sleep to take a single step and then crumble into the dust. And there are at least 2 reported incidents of the subject returning to consciousness and to their long-dead families over 100 years later, to the general confusion of everyone around who knew them to have disappeared 100 years ago. And the reason that's kind of been put forth for that is that time works differently in the fairy realm. If you watched... was it the last season or the second to last season?
Are we going into True Blood?
Yeah.
Are we connecting our vampire episode with this one?
If you watched that season of True Blood that had fairies in it, it was mostly garbage about the fairies, but the part about crossing into the other realm and time functioning differently, that was spot on. The part about eating food was also spot on. So if you eat the food of the fair folk, you can never return to our world, to our realm.
That would suck because I would.
You're cursed.
I would be like, ooh, food.
Yeah. So, those two things were right. Okay, and then everything else True Blood did was horribly wrong.
Got it.
I remember watching like aghast as that was like happening on that show. I was like, God. And then I think like a season later it was over. So didn't work out too well. The other thing that the fair folks, so I told you that like sometimes they are harsh with their punishments for crossing into their realm, and time does move differently there, but they do get bored. So the fair folk have been known to cross into our realm and steal children.
Oh, I've heard about those. That's what you call the changelings, right?
Yes. So sometimes they will steal our children and replace them with their own in changeling sort of situations.
That was also a movie with
Angelina Jolie.
Angelina Jolie, wasn't it? Yeah.
That was a really, really good movie. Yes. So they will switch. They will create the changelings where they steal a human child and then they take, they replace it with some like odd, sort of slightly off shadow creature child. Yeah.
Honey.
Doesn't sound
the
great.
Baby has a black cloud around
the baby
it.
appears to be a shadow creature.
Just give him.
Might want to call the pediatrician. Maybe some Pedialyte.
Just give him his passy or nappy, whatever they call them.
It'll be fine. So, and what the fair folk do with the human children is not necessarily clear. It's kind of a subject shrouded in mystery as to what they are stealing those children for. You're giving me a look. Do you know?
Well, no, not really. I was just trying to think, like, because don't they in some cases replace them with almost like or like fairy-like people, or who can pass? Because
I guess it depends on the story.
I guess it would depend on the story, yeah. But I thought that because it was a changeling, that it looked like your child, but not quite in some instances. So I don't know if it was like...
Usually what they describe is like kind of jewel-eyed, like slack jaw, not quite all there. I mean, honestly, like, they're kind of describing a mentally challenged child. Like, all the descriptions kind of sound like that, but like...
Well, I'm sure that could have root in it too, you know what I mean?
Just be that somebody had Down syndrome, like, you know?
Yeah,
like,
no, and that was, I mean... could be an excuse that...
Which from back then,
back then that they would have given, so...
But do you know how to cure the changeling?
I have not heard about how to cure the changeling.
So the traditional cure is to lock the changeling in a hot oven. And it comes with the heavy disclaimer that there's no guarantee you'll get your child back. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that that's a high stakes gamble? You know?
Wait, is the oven on?
What if it just is your child, but they like didn't get enough sleep last night? What if they're sick?
Or what if you had a friggin' crazy lady as your mother and they just wanted to kill you and threw you in the oven? Maybe that's what happened to the witch in Hansel and Gretel. Maybe they were changelings and she was just trying to, kill those evil changelings.
Oh, it's like an alternative. What are they like? Alternative fairy tales? It's like Wicked.
Yeah.
Or what was that? Maleficent.
Yeah.
Write it.
Yeah.
We'll be millionaires. So, another interesting thing that can happen.
Besides burning your child in the oven.
Yeah. If that's not enough for you. So another interaction, I guess, that we can have with the fair folk are... It's called... This is really interesting. It's called wire sex.
Okay.
You know I always got to bring it back to sex.
Yeah, wire sex.
Wire sex. So, the fair folk, it's like a really interesting, I'm not sure, there's different iterations of it where, like, some people say that it results from them, because they have, like, their usual, like, I guess, presentation is as the tall, gorgeous elves from Lord of the Rings. This is all I want you to see every time you look at them. Right. Fiery hair was also a trait, which makes sense because we're an island.
Yes.
But then they had, like, smaller versions. Like, in some stories, they can kind of, like, transform to a smaller size that's more like a traditional fairy, what you would imagine. So, in that sort of strand of the myth, basically what happens is your hair becomes really knotted. And some people say that that's because the fair folk have been dancing in it during the night for their parties. But apparently, like, they have this...
they seem to throw a lot of parties.
They do, and they have this interesting obsession with hair. And it says if a fair folk has turned their attention to your hair, you'll find a comb won't help you. You have to cut the knot out. You can't brush through. You start getting... I mean, it's basically like... My mom used to call them rat's nest when I was...
down in the South, that was a rat that nested
absolutely,
in your head.
A rat's nest. And when I was 10, she actually cut my hair off to, like, my earlobes, and it was awful. It was a terrible bowl cut because I wouldn't let her brush it because I was very tender-headed. It was not a good look for me.
I'd love to have seen that.
Yeah. So, an interesting sort of modern-day take on this that I thought was kind of interesting is instead of tangling your hair... what they'll do is tangle your cords. So chargers, phone chargers,
that's some
laptop
bullshit.
chargers, headphones, and all of those, like, annoying little tangles that take you, minutes of your day to get out are said to potentially be left by the fair folk, and who knows?
Well, they're assholes.
Yeah. Right? I mean, that's kind of their thing, though. Like, like they delight in
well, they're probably a little bit salty from having to go away when the Malaysians came and told them, you know what I mean? Like, when they lost that battle, they're probably a little salty from, I
don't know. I don't know that it's like a vindictiveness. I think they just, if you look back at their history, like they just seem to be little chaos agents, and I think they're kind of one site that I read in researching called them sociopaths because they just kind of and I don't know that I totally agree with that because I don't know that a sociopath is capable of some of the more generous moves that the fair folk make, because there are stories of them like helping a human, or like a human who's been in the fair folk's realm who actually does get to go back to their family, and they're not, like, aged and blah, 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 and they show the proper respect to the fair folk, and the fair folk kind of accept that and are lenient, I guess, with them. So I don't know that I would call them sociopaths. I just think that they have their own sense of morality.
Makes sense.
And I think it revolves around respect and also, genuineness. But yeah, so the wire sex thing is, it's a term for when all your wires get all tangled up together, and
why is it?
No one knows why.
Are the fairies having sex in or around your headphones?
No.
That's how they get tangled up?
I don't think it involves copulation at all. I think it's just, like, when everything's tangled together. Like, the definition of wire sex on, like, Urban Dictionary is when a bunch of cords get tangled together. Okay. So... the fair folk are said to be, in some circles, responsible for that. Which totally makes sense to me, because it's like a minor inconvenience that is like such a
It's not devastating annoyance to you. It's not actually harming you or upsetting any sort of like delicate, balance. It's just a little mischievous.
Yeah, it's just a little tiny fuck you. So, yes.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So... I thought that was particularly interesting.
And you don't, like... Because, like I said, we said in the start, it's St. Patrick's Day coming up. Mm-hmm. And you don't really... A lot of this, the fairies and the Fomorians and all of that stuff... was said to be, well, you have St. Patrick, who he banished snakes from Ireland, supposedly.
Sorry, what?
He banished snakes from Ireland.
Like,
well, okay, so here's the deal. There were never snakes there to begin with.
Right, I mean, it's an island. So, like, how did they take a boat over from, like, the mainland?
Nah.
Did the snakes, like, charter a ship and then just, like,
but the story
come over and burn it? Because they knew that they were taken over?
Well, it has something to do with ice and the weather and all of that stuff. So, snakes were never able to get over there.
Yes.
I think there
and the
was
fact
literally
that it is surrounded by water on all sides.
That too. But one reptile did make it over. There is one reptile
is it
that
the frog?
Is found.
No, that's an amphibian.
It's some sort of lizard creature. Oh. He he made it over. Nobody else did.
Damn.
But anyway, no. St. Patrick is said to have banished the snakes from Ireland, which is why there are no snakes. But obviously, like we said, there were never snakes there to begin with. But some people say that by snakes, he actually banished magic, pagan religions, fair folk,
because
all of that
the
stuff.
Catholics were not having that.
Yeah, and and a lot of the religions at the time, and pagan religions, again, were sort of seen as evil, the devil, what have you. So St. Patrick sort of came in and established Christianity in Ireland, and as such banished all of the fair folk, the changelings, all of the creatures, all of the magic, all of that away into the water. So
with the Fomorians,
yes,
interestingly,
with the Fomorians, interestingly enough. So, which makes me kind of mad.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously it survived or whatever, but.
I
don't know. I still kind of feel like,
I mean, I doubt. I mean, because if we look at the lore, the fair folk live in the other realm. So how could they be banished if you're banishing them from this one? I think they're much more clever.
But that's supposedly why you don't see them as much anymore. Because supposedly when they first went to the Otherworld or whatever, you would see them pop up more and more in in history.
Right.
They would be more interactive, and then Christianity comes in and just destroys everything.
Well, way to bum everybody out. I feel like we just want to use St. Patrick's as an excuse to friggin' drink. So there you go.
One more drink. Yeah. Cheers again.
God, we haven't died yet.
This is watered down. Oh, yeah, that's mostly water.
Great. Good. Yep. Ugh. Oh, water and then like a really, really strong cream taste.
Not good.
And no liquor. Whew.
Not at all.
Oh, that was bad. Okay. All right. I'm glad that one was the end. So, what do you have to take us out today? You have something...
So I just have an Irish blessing that I would like, for us to both sort of say, and it's just a nice little note to end off on, and just to sort of send out some good vibes and good energy to our listeners.
Okay.
So, we'll start, and 1, 2, 3.
May your troubles be less, may your blessings be more. Nothing but happiness shall come through your door. That was great.
Yay! So nothing but happiness will come through y'all's door. So
I hope you want that. I mean, you are listening to like a podcast on the macabre. Well, maybe you want like
the
terrible
as well. So I mean, we've got to give them a good balance. We can't always be dark and like we've got to pay tribute to the magic and the fair folk deserve their chance too.
That's true. Well, I mean, they're pretty formidable themselves. So if you find yourself in the other realm, best words of advice that we can give you
don't eat the food.
Well, try not to eat the food, but also respect, genuineness, more respect.
Yes.
And maybe you make it out in the next millennia.
I would say so. I think, You might befriend one, might marry one. Who knows?
Yeah.
I'm sure that
been known to happen. Yeah, that has been known to happen. All right. So until next time.
We went through a whole episode in Irish history and did not even mention leprechauns, not once. I feel like I'm fairly proud.
Damn it. We almost made it. We almost made it. We were at the sign-off. We were at the freaking sign-off, and then you bring up Lucky Charms.
No. I think that's a good thing. I think that would be expected. So I'm glad we went. I like the subjects that we talked about today. I think they're very, very interesting. So.
All right. Well,
I'm getting the fucking death stare.
We're gonna rein in our resident Irish lad next episode. All right. Until next time, you guys.
Stay spooky.
And also stay creepy, because apparently we have 2 sign-offs and they're different.
Wait, did you talk to them about YouTube?
We're on YouTube. Go listen to us. Actually, yeah, I probably should talk about this. So we are definitely on the iTunes podcast app, which is absolutely where you should listen to us if you have an Apple device, if you have a Mac or a iPhone. That's what they're called, iPhones. However, for people who are on Android, I know some people can get us through SoundCloud and some people can't. So if you go to YouTube and search the Haunted Heart Podcast and then scrolly-rolly about halfway down the page, you will find our creator page, or you can just search under creators if you know how to do that. And all of our podcasts are posted there so that you can listen to them while you're at work on your computer, or you can listen to them, if you're a Droid user, you should be able to get access that way. They're also on our website, which is www.thehauntedheart.com. Yeah, and they're also on SoundCloud. So,
and as always, please share, subscribe.
Yes. Sharing and subscribing are the bomb. And if you want to give us a 5-star review, that is great. And if you want to give us a 1-star review, then
fuck off.
Maybe don't.
If you're thinking about giving us a 1-star review, you can go to the land of the fair folk and stay there forever.
Yeah. Maybe we're part fair folk. You don't know. Remember that respect thing? There you go.
I already told you that I thought I was, so there you go.
Okay. Well, this is the longest sign-off ever.
That's fine. Because it's our podcast and we can do whatever the fuck we want.
So we're going to end on a 1, 2, 3, bye. 1, 2, 3, bye.